All right, welcome to the Two Sons podcast. Happy Friday, everybody. It's been a couple of weeks.
It's been a long time,
It's been almost 14 days since we released an episode. We've been bad podsmen.
We're slacking.
We are slacking hardcore.
But there's no Star Wars stuff.
There has been no Star Wars stuff, but we do have some new stuff. We're going to be recording a bunch of stuff today, and then in the next week or so, we're going to be recording an instant reaction to Rebel Moon as well. So lots of TSP content coming out in the next few days.
TSP in your face.
We're gonna catch up because Luke and I haven't seen each other in a little while. Then we're gonna talk a little bit about Darth Plagueis, this new book that we're reading, and then later we have a full review of The Eye of Darkness, which is the latest High Republic book. All three of those episodes will be released in the next week or so. Don't forget, before we get started, it would mean a lot to us if you guys would take a second to scroll down and hit that subscribe button as we try to get this channel off the ground. We appreciate you guys supporting us over the course of the last couple of years. We've done a lot. We're like almost to 100 episodes.
Yeah.
It's not that far away.
Dude, it happens fast, though.
Yeah, it does. It does.
It really does.
And we're heading into a big year for Star Wars, too.
Yes.
There's a lot of stuff coming out. We're getting into these books. First of all, how are you doing? How's the table coming along? How's G-Man?
G's good. G is just full-blown standing. Not by himself, but he's like pulling to stand, and he keeps getting himself in trouble. Because the dude can stand, and then he just doesn't know what to do after that.
It's the after standing thing.
Yeah. So this morning I'm feeding him, and Elena's like, "Is that a bruise on his head?" And I look, I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's a bruise in the shape of his toy."
He landed on his toy.
Yeah, he like fell and hit his head on the ground, and I didn't think it was that big of a deal. Dude, the kid is so tough. I think I've said that before on this pod. He is so tough. This kid has a bruise on the side of his head, right? And then he cried for like legitimately 7 seconds when that happened, and then just went about his day. If I had a bruise that big on my head, I would definitely be complaining about it for a few days.
I always wonder if there's like an initial phase of babiness where like they actually don't they're not emotionally intelligent enough to realize what they can gain by crying. So instead what they do is like they realize crying is actually a huge waste of time because they're an infant, because they're like, oh, that hurt, I fucked up my head. And
then they get over it.
That over there looks interesting.
Yeah, I know.
They just move on to the next thing.
But
when they cry, they get something. Then
like
they start,
the toddler phase.
Yes. That's where G is going to be a real
We
pain
are
in the ass.
entering the realm of toddler phase. Dude, he's figured out every single time we put him into his playpen, because it's got that like foam base, and around the foam base there's a border that you can like pull off. The kid has understood that he can crawl to the side, reach his arm through his baby jail, and then he undoes it every time we put him in there. And then he wheels it around.
Undoes the border.
He undoes the border and then wields the foam piece around like it's a sword until you take it from him.
Dude, yesterday, so I went to my brother, every year for Christmas, my brothers and I get together and we just kind of hang out and play guitar and watch football and have some beers.
Just guy stuff.
And my older brother just had his first son about a year ago. Actually, Easton just turned a year.
Yeah.
And we're watching the game last night. Who was it? It was the Saints versus the
Chargers.
The Chargers. No, it wasn't the Chargers.
Rams.
The Rams. Yeah. And
dude, LA
but
has
by
two
the way,
teams, and they're both the same colors, and it drives me crazy.
Dude, oh yeah. The other thing too is Matt Stafford is like, I think Matt Stafford is so damn good.
Dude, talk about a tough dude.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I like there's a very small number of quarterbacks that take over him. Anyway, I digress. All of a sudden Easton's walking, like full blown walking right now. And I'm just sitting there drinking my beer, watching the game. And next thing you know, like Easton comes walking in front of me holding a like 4-foot long wooden stick. And I'm like, what the heck? And it was like the stick that's jammed in the sliding glass door to stop it from opening, And he's just wielding it, like holding it above his head and just running through the room. And I'm like, okay, something bad's about to happen in a second.
They just find everything they're not supposed to. Like if there's something that's breakable, they'll be like, that's interesting. Let's play with that. Yeah, dude, it's going to be an absolute mess. And our house is like so aesthetically pleasing. Like we try so hard to make it look good, and then he's just going to ruin that for us. He's just going to ruin it.
Oh no, he's going to. It's guaranteed. I have two things I want to bitch about before we get to our major topics. So first of all, it's amazing as an adult how you just randomly get like punched in the side of the head with like expenses.
Oh.
And so randomly the other day, like I had to do my car registration, which by the way, not complaining, everybody has to do car registration, but like I bought a 2-year set. It's $550.
Yeah.
Plus I had to get my emissions test because my truck is now officially 5 years old. So that was another $12.85 or whatever that was down the toilet. Then literally, Carly and I are doing the dishes the other day, and we pick up like this weird smell. Our garbage disposal crapped out and started leaking.
Oh,
and
gross.
the interior housing of the garbage disposal started leaking. Thank God, we had a giant plastic tray underneath and a bowl that was full of old Brita filter or packaged Brita filters back from when we had a Brita pitcher, which we don't have anymore. Just happened to be sitting under there.
That's why you don't get rid of stuff, Jay.
Yeah, exactly. It caught all the water, but it had like this nasty mildewy smell. And so we avoided catastrophe, but I had to call a plumber out on short notice.
Dude.
I had to go buy a Badger, and it was $500 was gone like that, and you're just like, damn it.
I saw this thing, and it was making fun of how millennials just don't own houses, because it's so expensive, and then the millennial guy, the character was like, well, it's not like I live paycheck to paycheck, like why can't I buy a house? And then the financial advisor that he was talking to, he's like, yeah, you don't live paycheck to paycheck. You live like vacation to expensive vet bill. Is where you live.
Yeah.
And the guy's like, oh shit, you're right.
Yeah. No, that's precisely where I am financially. It's like I'm finally at an age where I'm like on top of my stuff and I got some stuff. But every time something bad happens, it's still like, oh,
shit.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Or like last year when I messed up my side view mirror and that ended up being $1,000, you're just like, ah.
I think this is just us like being like slightly older, right? Like we're both in our 30s now. Like for example, our Nest thermostat took a dump. Did I tell you about this?
No.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so Nest thermostats are not the cheapest thing in the world, right?
Yeah, like $200, right?
Yeah, there's different ones that are nicer and stuff. So a few years ago, like we're talking 3, this was like I think right before or right after Google bought Nest, right? It was right after, I think. So I'm going throughout my day, and then I look over, and our Nest thermostat has this low battery sign. I'm like, why does this have a low battery sign? This makes absolutely no sense. It's attached to the wall. Like, what are we talking about? So anyways, I go online. There's legitimately zero support for Nest thermostats. You cannot call. There's nobody that you can call. Do not ever buy a Nest. There's nobody you can call. The directions that they had on how to fix it were useless.
Factory reset is basically all they say, probably.
And it wasn't even that. It was such bull crap. And
did you find out that there was a battery in it at some?
So it does have a battery in it that you can charge, but it literally just wasn't charging. And here's what's crappy about this is because we have 2. One of our Nest thermostats is hooked into the app, and one of them is not.
Oh no!
The one that's hooked into the app is the one that failed.
No.
And the solution was pretty much buy a new Nest. Is pretty much what I found out online. So here's what's crazy.
What a joke!
Oh
man.
yeah, and then it would power off because it had no battery. Right? Get this. This was a designed failure, is what I found out. I unhooked it from the app. Guess what started happening? The Nest started working fine. It started charging. As soon as I disconnected it from the app.
So it's literally a software issue.
Yeah, but I think it's a programmed failure is what it is.
That's exactly what it is.
And I've discovered that because we're like, oh, like I wonder if I just need to like update the software, which I've had products that don't charge until you update the software. Anyways, the second I connected the other one to the app, it had the same failure. Isn't that crappy? I'll never buy a Nest again.
But no support. Yeah,
no zero support. I will never buy a Nest again.
That's ridiculous, man. And you would think too, because like Nest was one of the, like, if I'm not mistaken, one of the like early Silicon Valley like kind of new ventures. You'd think they would have back end support, but I guess not.
Well, I'm sure they did. Dude, talk about a bitch fest. So, the same issue happened with our baby monitor. They got bought out by a different company, and then the monitor stopped working. And then I went to call it, and then I called the number that existed for when it was still owned by the other company. We're talking like 8 months ago that like we bought this, and there's no support anymore.
Oh gosh, man, that's super annoying.
Yep.
Oh man. Well, yeah. Again, it just everything just comes in waves, and it's just what you're always just going from one crisis to the next, and you solve one. And
Dude,
then
but
there's
ours are
another
so
around the
easy. Like,
corner.
how blessed are we, man?
Yeah, we are blessed.
Like,
There's no
like
question. We are
seriously, like
blessed.
there's like you and I are two of the most blessed dudes that I know.
Well, and again, there are versions of it where it could get a hell of a lot worse. And,
for
and so,
sure.
yeah, I don't want to sound like we're complaining, but we're complaining.
We're complaining, and you know what? It's kind of fun to do. But I would not recommend a Nest. Sorry, Google. We just lost a sponsorship. 2 of them actually.
So, the thing that I want to complain about Star Wars wise in this particular segment, you had sent me an Instagram post right after I had sent you the same Instagram post. So there's 2 Instagram posts that I think kind of tie this together. So first is this
Jason's referring to the
interview
fact that I like never look at the messages that he sends me, and now it's happened twice where he's sent me something, and like a day later I'll send him the exact same thing, not realizing that he already sent it to me.
It happens. It's Instagram reel double sending. It's a thing. So Adam Driver is getting interviewed on some show. I can't remember what it was. And he's basically being asked some pretty direct questions about the execution process of the sequel trilogy.
He was so candid.
Oh yeah, and he basically what he said was like the idea was it was going to be the reverse Vader, meaning like Darth Vader was this guy that was, you know, staunchly evil from day one,
Right.
and then kind of like slowly was redeemed. Like there's even like these weird conversations where like in Hoth when he's talking with Luke, there's this he reveals himself as the father and like, hey, let's rule the galaxy as father and son. And then there's even this weird exchange on Endor when Luke turns himself in, and like he has like a pretty serious conversation with Vader, and Vader looks back at him and goes like, "It's too late for me." Like it was kind of like a little bit more of like a looser, lighter Vader, and then obviously it culminates in him turning and throwing Palpatine down the shaft, right? And Adam Driver's like, mine was supposed to be the reverse of that, like. He's kind of this undecided, like kind of on the fence kind of guy, and he's supposed to basically descend into darkness over the course of the show.
And that makes sense because in Force Awakens, he was like having legitimate turmoil about killing his dad.
Yeah, he was on the fence, and then suddenly he wasn't. And like and basically what he said is he's like, he straight up says, he goes, and then Rian took it in a different direction. And or is it Ryan Johnson or is it Rian?
I don't know.
Whatever, Rian takes it in. It takes it in a different direction, and then he goes. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere for the 3rd movie came the dyad thing, which by the way, I totally forgot about the dyad thing.
Oh,
how freaking stupid that is. But like,
it's so bad.
It's so bad. But I combined that with the second reel that I saw, and I don't think I sent this one to you, but you'll have to let me know if you saw it. But it was George Lucas getting interviewed, and he's talking about the movie studios. And he basically goes like, movie studios suck. They have no talent. All they care about is the bottom line.
Yeah.
And they are what's wrong with movies right now. It's basically what he says. And it was a pretty old clip too.
Oh, I wonder how old.
I want to say like it was probably pre-selling to Disney. I'm not certain.
Oh,
it's
okay,
possible.
yeah. So not that old.
You know how it is with Instagram Reels too. Like it's very difficult to tell when the interview took place.
And let's be real, George Lucas hasn't really changed his style much.
No, like same vibe. Rocking the same vibe.
Like New Balance, blue jeans, like collared shirt, flannel, same glasses, same haircut. Like, that's George.
Do you remember the reel that was going around of like the random news interview and he's walking in the background?
In the background, he's just average Joe, average George.
But like just in general, I thought it was the great example of like, you know, and what George said in his little clip, which I thought was super interesting, is he's like the movie studios view it as a business, and he's like, it's not a business, it's an art form.
Oh gosh,
and it's really that simple. It is an art form that happens to make money.
Right.
And like to put it simply, when the art becomes secondary to the money, the work suffers. And like you would never think of it like this. How did George Lucas create Star Wars originally? He created Star Wars originally by conceptualizing an entire universe and storyline, and then he started making the movies.
And he didn't think it was going to be super successful, and he still went for it. Like, dude, there's like this level of magic that's kind of indescribable, right? And that is like the peak Star Wars, where it wasn't about the money, right?
Yeah.
Dude, the same thing probably happens with professional sports. Like, could you envision like watching an F1 race when it's only about the sport, like years and years and years and years ago. Now it's pretty much all about the money, right? The sport is secondary. Dude, that's the same thing that happens with everything. Healthcare is a huge example of that too. It's sad. There's this probably like there's this like the peak of any given, like the peak of the movie industry was probably right when they realized they were making a ton of money doing it, but it's because it was good.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
then it kind of is like a cycle,
dude.
Yeah,
But like all movies are the same now. Like they're all so boring. Like not okay. That's an overstatement of a lifetime. Many of the movies are super boring and very like you can tell exactly what's going to happen with like each time you watch them, and like the flavor of movies, like even in the early 2000s, are way different than movies now. Like all like the Christmas movies and like the rom-coms from like the early 2000s are so much better.
Well, in general, I've seen a lot of actors and actresses and producers and directors talking a lot about how like it's just impossible to get one of these movie studios to make a big budget film unless it's a superhero movie or like some sort of big box office type of thing. And so basically if you want to make quality stories, you have to go to these like lower level studios and they don't have the money to throw at it. And it just turns into this big problem. And like to put it simply, like they went into the sequel trilogy without a plan. And it honestly is crazy to even think about from the standpoint of like they started from the beginning with 3 separate directors on schedule.
Yeah. How?
Like, why? They started from the beginning with no plan after the first movie. Like, there's
literally insane.
There's so many different things that slip through the cracks there that are honestly like unconscionable. And
yeah.
And like when you see a guy like Adam Driver sit there and you can kind of feel it coming through his voice as he's saying it, but it's almost like a twinge of regret. Or it's just like it's like this was supposed to be this cool thing, and then it just became this other thing. You know what I mean?
Which is it shows you how incredible Star Wars is. Like the bones of Star Wars are so good that like you can still have amazing characters that were ruined. Like Kylo Ren is one of my favorite characters of all times, and like his story was kind of ruined. And despite the terrible, terrible, terrible writing, it's still like a very interesting and compelling character. Like that's how cool the Star Wars universe is.
And then they turn him to the light, and then they kill him, which is
and then
it was
dude,
so bizarre.
The Rey Kylo thing where they like transferred life into each other, but like got happy and then died,
and then there's a kiss. It's like
the worst.
Dude, it's so bad. It's
the
so
worst.
bad. And the dyad is so stupid too. It all of it is so dumb. And like then you juxtapose it with like because we're going to be talking about Plagueis here in a minute, and it's like when you really because Plagueis is essentially a prequel to the Phantom Menace,
right?
And it is so immaculately planned out, and everything ties together in a way that is pretty damn clean. Like,
right.
It's not perfect. Like, there's, and Disney has complicated it with things like the Obi-Wan Kenobi TV series and some stuff like that, where like some of the stuff has like some loose fitting pieces, but most of the George Lucas stuff fits together immaculately well. And it just, it goes to show you that like George had a work of art in the form of his 6 movies that made a ton of money because the art was transcendent. Then Disney bought the rights to the art and started trying to literally create screenplays based solely on the idea of making money.
Yes.
The art suffered, and then we get to a point where it's like now we have a Rise of Skywalker that's like universally panned. You know what I mean? And that's just how it goes.
I think I heard something about movies nowadays where, and this was probably even more so prior to the pandemic, but about how essentially they tried to like make their budget back and some within the first couple weeks of releasing, and like it's considered a failure if they don't do that.
Which is so stupid.
Whereas like a lot of movies that you and I grew up with, we knew that there was like a simmer that could occur where people would go out and buy the DVD afterwards or whatever. You know what I mean? Like there was a lot of money to be made longer term than just the original release and box office.
Yeah, it's a different era, and I get that. But like it just to me, I agree with George Lucas from the standpoint of like his general point about the difference in approach between the artist and the moneymaker.
Right.
And like to me, there's this. It's funny because they're like different pathways entirely. It's in basketball, for instance. Like there's this like if you're up the coaching tree, you go from like film study to like maybe an end of the bench assistant to like
Right.
a mid-level assistant to like the lead assistant to like maybe the head coach and varying different levels, like high
Right.
school, college, pros, that all that kind of stuff. And then there's like the general management path, which is like you go from scout to like maybe an assistant GM to like maybe a guy who's involved with drafting the draft process to maybe a guy who's involved with scouting free agents to whatever, up to all the way up to general manager or president of basketball operations. And they're both like doing very different jobs, but they're both intricately involved in the development of the final product.
Right.
And there needs to be like really good communication between both groups in a franchise, because like there are certain elements that are more complicated than people realize from a coaching standpoint. Like people might be like, oh, change the starting lineup or trade this guy or blah, 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 blah. And you don't understand what personality dynamics are taking place in the locker room. You don't understand if like maybe if you trade for this guy and you move this other guy to the bench, maybe his confidence craters and then suddenly you lose him for the rest of the season.
Yeah, or
mentally.
his buddy's teammate, or his teammate's buddy is all pissed now that his friend isn't starting. You
Exactly.
know? And then all of a sudden they hate your guts.
Exactly. It's complicated. And that's why, for instance, almost every sport that has a joint head coach, general manager, like when it's the same guy, like when like Belichick, famously the Patriots don't draft well.
Yeah.
Or like you'd see like Stan Van Gundy when he was in charge of the Detroit Pistons. It's like he was in charge of drafting and coaching the team. And it's like all of a sudden stuff starts slipping through the cracks. So it's like both sides, there's like a separation. And that's kind of the way I look at it. Because like a lot of these guys that are in the management portion of media companies, like some of them start as agents, you know, some of them start as producers, but like they go up this entirely different channel towards this profession.
Right.
Whereas like the artists, like the people that are like the directors or the actors or whatever, they are going up this like different ladder. And at the end of the day, like that disconnect becomes a problem when these people are making decisions based on money and these people are making decisions based on their passion.
Yes.
And it releases these like two different thought processes.
Yes.
And then what ends up happening is these people, because they have the power, start saying no,
even though they don't know what's going on.
Even though they don't know what's going on.
Dude, and then sprinkle in some deep Star Wars lore that the writers have no clue and they have no knowledge of. And then you've got a recipe for a terrible movie.
Oh, it legitimately was a complete and total disaster.
Dude,
there's no other way around it.
And what's frustrating too is because like you get the sense again, because all these new movies feel the same. Like they really do. Like you get the sense, like for example, anything that's supposed to be exciting or like somewhat like sci-fi, even though I don't really consider Star Wars sci-fi, which is a whole different thing. But anything that's like considered large scale in sci-fi, like they end up ramping the scale up to the high heavens where it like makes no sense, where like you get, you know, like what we've talked about, 1,000 Star Destroyers that wouldn't have existed in the original Star Wars. And then they just try and ramp up the scale just because they think it's going to be so freaking exciting for all the, you know, the viewers. And then it just gets washed out and boring.
It gets washed out. It gets boring. And then that's the other thing too, where this big box office thing where it's like they just have seen this Marvel stuff where they think that's what draws people to the theaters, which it's like fundamentally that's not what draws people to the theaters. And now here we go after Avengers Infinity War and Endgame succeeded because of an intricately developed storyline involving Thanos and these characters. And so then they try to continue to push that ideology in terms of the scale and the special effects, and all the Marvel movies are crapping out now.
Yeah.
And I just think in general, I think we're seeing this in a lot of industries. It's like the over I don't know what describe how you want to describe it, but it's like the overly capitalist approach to this filmmaking and art making stuff. There's this thing with rap music now too, where like rap music is cratering around the world in large part because they went from being like literally poetry, with it like amazing beat making, to like just gibberish crap
and mumbling.
And like that's the thing is like, and it's like, okay, for a few years there were a lot of bangers that were made and everything was thriving in this environment, and then all of a sudden everybody realized like actually this music's not very good, and then it just starts to crater.
When do we realize that with movies though? Is that something that you and I will ever get to experience again, or
I think we're experiencing it right now. I think right now with Marvel crapping out, with DC crapping out,
I hope so.
I think people are starting to realize pretty quickly that like the just squeezing the sponge for the sake of squeezing the sponge is not smart.
The whole entire grassroots thing.
Yeah.
Well, and artists are starting to figure that out too. From what I understand, there's been a lot more artists lately that have tried not to sign on with these huge labels just so they can continue to do their own thing and be who they are. Because like, wouldn't that be frustrating when you're like trying to make music and then someone's telling you all of a sudden how to make music and you've been doing it for 20 years?
Oh yeah, well,
like that'd be crazy.
To put it simply, like one of the things I love about the Volume is they give me complete and total creative autonomy. Yeah. And if it ever got to a point where it wasn't like that, and I don't believe so because this has been a great relationship, but like if it ever got to that point, or if I was working with a different company in the future where it didn't feel like that, like I'd be miserable. Like and I totally get why like George Lucas was like, screw you guys, I'm funding this myself. Like George Lucas was one of the original guys that gave a big middle finger to the studios.
I love it. And look how it worked out.
And it worked out.
It was worth billions of dollars.
He's a billionaire.
Yeah.
It's literally that simple.
Dude, I think of some of the artists too, like early on before they get discovered, like Post Malone. Like, dude, Posty was kind of weird and he did his own thing and everyone loved it, man. Like everyone absolutely loved it. And I think like I think we need to be more down for just like, you know, accepting like the odd approach and then just like enjoying it for what it is, which is art.
Well, and again, it to me, it stems from like a fundamental thought process that so many of these studios have, which is like, this is the way you have to do it.
There's not a recipe.
And it's like, no, that's not it. Like I can't tell you how many times like I've seen on television, like so many people go out and just ride the hot take train and ride the and I think
sports in particular, man.
Oh yeah, and by the way, I think we're reaching a breaking point there too.
I
think we're reaching a breaking point where people are getting sick of
people realize like,
hysteria.
This is all trash, huh?
Yeah, this is all trash.
It's like, it's one thing if you hear one hot take and it happens every once in a while, you're like, oh, that's a hot take, that's pretty interesting. They're going for hot takes every single time. They're no longer hot. They're just takes.
Yeah, it's bad. And what's funny about it too is like you're starting to see stuff like kind of poke through the surface that's doing really well. Like it makes me really happy to see a guy like JJ Redick doing super well.
Dude, let's talk about your podcast, Jay. Like you're being so humble right now. Like you have legitimate, real breakdowns of basketball. You have great information, and you've become wildly successful, and it's been like one of the funnest things that I've got to experience in my lifetime.
Well, it's been cool. I understand.
Like you're talking about JJ Redick. It's like, dude, like let's talk about you, man. Like you have great takes. You're not just making these terrible hot takes. Like you have great breakdowns.
It's been cool seeing as a validation, seeing the show do well with its current format, no doubt. But like, I'm not the only one. There are other people that are succeeding,
right.
and that's been cool to see, because to me that is the ultimate direction this all goes. And honestly, like, it's the beauty of the modern layout with this kind of stuff,
like YouTube,
with all this stuff, because you don't have to work for ESPN anymore,
right?
And have to meet gigantic, studio related revenue goals in order to make a successful show. And it's opened up a door for more of that creativity, which I think is really good for the space.
For sure. Don't I hope people don't read into this too much, but like these larger studios, it kind of feels like they have like a little bit of an agenda, which is like, oh, like the Pacers suck this week, or like they're really good, or even like different agendas.
Well, no, that's definitely a thing.
And it's hard and like I think that happens with like larger companies like Disney, right? Like all of a sudden, like they're like, okay, this year the movies that we're making are gonna have this theme. It's just like, could we just not? Like, can we just do our own thing?
That's definitely a thing where like if the Lakers, so for instance, if the Lakers drop a couple of games over a weekend, like I guarantee you, like when everyone walks in the studio at ESPN on Monday morning, like there's some high level exec or high level producer walks in. It's like, all right, here we go,
Lakers are
catastrophe. They're like, fuck yeah, like, and it's so funny because like I could tell there are times like my company just knows now that I won't do that. So like it's funny because like when stuff like that happens, they just expect a measured reaction from me on that kind of stuff. But to be honest, like I just can't fake it. That's part of it too. Is like I'm
Well,
not capable of faking it,
dude.
so.
And no one needs to hold your hand to tell you how to make good content. And like, unfortunately, Star Wars has gotten so bad that now everyone who's in those meetings creating content, they have to have their hand held by Dave Filoni now.
Oh, yeah.
Because the content has been that bad to where Dave has to be in charge of everyone now.
Oh yeah, it's ridiculous. I get it, but I in Dave we trust. Hopefully he can turn everything around.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that's all we have for this episode. We'll see you guys shortly for some Plagueis.
Thanks a lot.